Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host, Mitch. Glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today we've got an episode of Penny for Your Thoughts. On episodes like these, I'm going to go over some unique and interesting cards that fit a certain category or theme. And then I want to hear your picks for some ones that I might have missed. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And while you're at it, subscribe and review our podcast as well. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So today's topic's going to be janky, awesome black sorceries. So in Commander, in Magic, there are a ton of cards. Some are good, some are great, and some are janky. Now, you kind of just know a janky card when you see it. You know, you might double or triple take and be like, wait, what does that exactly do? And you might think, well, what kind of deck would ever want to use that? But I'm here to tell you that there are definitely some janky and awesome cards out there that do some really cool things that you might not have or consider in your decks. And maybe there are some decks that should be considering these that currently don't have them or don't know about them. So let's go through my list. Obviously, there are a ton of more cards. I can only mention so many in a show. So at the end, maybe let me know what cards you think should be on this list that I haven't mentioned. But yeah, let's jump into it with my first one with Ritual of the Machine. It's a sorcery for 2 black, and it says, as additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, gain control of target non-artifact, non-black creature. So this is like a control creature spell, but in black, not blue. This is like an entirely blue spell. I mean, minus the sacrificing part. Blue is in charge of kind of gaining control of creatures. Black does it, but in a way of kind of like reanimating from someone else's graveyard. This one just straight up does it when it's in play. You do have to sacrifice a creature, but in a lot of black decks, like aristocrat-style strategy decks, sacrificing a creature, you actually sometimes even want to sacrifice creatures. You've got a ton of creature fodder there, so you're basically just trading your worst creature for the best creature on the board. Now, yes, that creature can't be an artifact, and it can't be a black creature, but any other creature on the board you can just take. So if someone's got, a Consecrated Sphinx, so that's my Consecrated Sphinx now. If someone else has this, huge threat on the board, I've got that now too. So this is something that can kind of come out of nowhere. Again, you're not expecting this as a black effect. It's a very old card, so obviously they haven't kind of continued this trend of, oh, okay, yeah, this is something black can do. This is kind of not breaking the color pie entirely, but kind of in a way. So yeah, it's just something that can come out of nowhere. It's something that can be very valuable. Again, if you've got a lot of creature fodder in your deck, it's for 4 mana, gaining control of the best creature on the board. That's fantastic. So this card, again, it's janky, it's awesome. I think you should be considering it for a couple decks. Let's go to the next one with Boneyard Parlay. And this, again, is the kind of other way to gain control of creatures in black. It's a sorcery that costs 5 black. It says, exile up to 5 target creature cards from graveyards, and opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put all cards from the pile of your choice onto the battlefield under your control, and the rest into their owner's graveyards. So this is kind of like a fact or fiction, but for creatures out of graveyards instead of cards off the top of your library. And basically, I do think this card is being underrated. I mean, for 7 mana, you're essentially going to be regenerating anywhere between, in Commander, 1 to 5. I mean, 5 is actually an option here because you could make a deal with one player. Maybe there's a certain player that's really far ahead, and you can make a deal to try to take that player down. So you basically say, okay, I choose this opponent that's friendly to me right now. Hey, here's the piles, 0 and 5. And they give you all 5. Now, that's not always going to happen, obviously. But even if you're just getting the 2 or 3 of the best creatures in the graveyards, that's huge. That's a huge value, especially if you're in a deck that destroys a lot of creatures, if you're in a deck that mills, if you're in a deck that, wants to put creatures in your own graveyard. Again, this lets you pick 5 creatures from any graveyard. That includes yours and your opponents. You're just getting the best of the best, again, and picking the pile that you want. Again, you can make deals with this. You can get a lot of value out of it. And again, this is kind of the more traditional black way of gaining control of your opponent's creatures or just getting yours back too. Unlike Ritual of the Machine, this is kind of the more expected effect. And I do think it's being slept on a little bit as a good card that can provide you a ton of value. And it can be a finisher as well, getting you back some of the biggest creatures in the game out of graveyards, just smacking your opponents with them. And maybe it's their own creature, and that's even better. Dirge of the Dead is my next one. This one's a sorcery for 2 and a black. It says all creatures gain fear until end of turn. And it's got cycling for 1 and a black. And whenever you cycle it, you may have target creature gain fear until end of turn. So this one kind of is and so real quick, fear is that they can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or black creatures. So if you're playing against a player that has no artifact or black creatures, or a couple players that don't have those, then you're basically just saying, okay, my entire army is unblockable this turn. For 3 mana, I can just swing all my creatures through. Again, there are a ton of other effects, green effects that have, like an overrun effect where you're pumping your army and trying to get them through with extra trample damage or whatnot. But this is kind of the way to, okay, I don't need to pump my army. They're just not going to be able to be blocked this turn. If this spell just was 3 mana, creatures can't be blocked this turn, that would be pretty good. I mean, obviously there are times where, maybe everyone's got an artifact creature or black creature on the board, so you can't get everything through, but you're going to be able to get a lot of things through. And hey, if you're in that circumstance where, it's not going to be helpful, to cast this, you can just cycle it away. Again, so you essentially just replace this card for 2 mana, you draw a card, and on top of that, you can make 1 creature essentially unblockable until the end of the turn. So again, this is kind of like it can be a huge card we need to be, and it can also just be hey, I can get rid of this and replace it with something else whenever I need to be too. You can even use this in a political way as well. If one of your opponents is going to be attacking with a creature against someone else, that player might not have any blockers, any artifact or black blockers in play. You can say, okay, I can cycle this to give your creature unblockable until the turn, essentially. What are you going to do for me? So you can kind of make deals with it too. It can be a blowout card. It can be just a fantastic card that I think isn't getting the respect that it deserves. Again, it's kind of janky. It's kind of, things that you don't really see. Okay, my army has fear. Like, what? Why? But yeah, it's something that I think could really help out a lot of decks. Next up, we've got Sins of the Past. It's a sorcery for 4 black and says, until end of turn, you may play target instant sorcery card in your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. Exile Sins of the Past. So this one is kind of, again, in my opinion, breaking the color pie a bit. This is kind of a blue effect more so, where you're like, okay, I'm casting this out of my graveyard for free. Red has kind of like flashbacky effects as well too, but this one is definitely not entirely in black generally. You don't see black saying, okay, yeah, let's get an instant sorcery out of my graveyard and cast it. Again, there are some instant sorceries that cost much more than 6 mana and give you a ton of value. So being able to say, okay, I've got, this 10 mana sorcery in my graveyard. I'm going to cast Sins of the Past, essentially to save 4 mana on it and cast it for free. Again, your opponents really aren't going to be expecting this, a deck to be able to instantly play something from their graveyard and just kind of, take opponents by surprise. So I think this is just kind of it's a card that, again, I think breaks the color pie a little bit, but in a fun way that, can just come out of nowhere and really help you out. Next up, we've got Deliver Unto Evil. This is a sorcery for 2 and a black, and it says, choose up to 4 target cards in your graveyard. If you control a Bolas Planeswalker, return those cards to your hand. Otherwise, an opponent chooses 2 of them, leave the chosen cards into your graveyard, and put the rest into your hand. Exile Deliver Unto Evil. Now, I think this one actually, if it didn't even include the Bolas Planeswalker text, I think that actually might help it out. Yes, that really helps, obviously. Paying 3 mana to get 4 cards back if you happen to have a Bolas Planeswalker, that's great. But I think that kind of like, people see this as okay, I need to have a Bolas Planeswalker to actually make this card good. In my opinion, no. 3 mana to get 2 things back in black is a fantastic deal. It's a good deal in a lot of colors. But basically, yeah, saying, okay, again, this can be a very political card where you can cast this and say, hey, I have a board wipe in my graveyard, okay? We all need everyone except for this one opponent, we need to wipe the board to make sure that this one player doesn't win, okay? So I'm going to pick you, and you please give me back the board wipe and give me back, something else I need to. So you can kind of be political, make deals, and basically say, okay, hey, give me back these 2 things, and it'll help everyone out. So that's kind of a way to kind of, you can use this card again in a political way to get a lot back. Again, if you're in a deck that, that you can mill and get a lot of good things in your graveyard, sometimes there's no even good options for your opponents anyway, even if you aren't being political. If you just cast this and say, hey, you got to give me 2 of these 4 things back, and they got to say, oh, no, because it doesn't matter what they pick, it's not going to be good for them. Another card that, and when the second I saw it, I was trying to think of a lot of different ways to use it, and it's Awaken the Erstwhile. It's a sorcery that costs 3 black. It says each player discards all the cards in their hand, then creates that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So this basically says, hey, you've got a control deck. Sorry, now all those cards in your hand are zombies in play. And you know what? Let's just say, okay, maybe you don't need those cards. Let's discard them, and instead let's just bring things to the board and make this a combat focused kind of match. So this kind of can throw a wrench into a lot of players' game plans. Obviously, they're not expecting to just lose their hand. For 5 mana, essentially everyone losing their hand. But then it kind of changes it to, okay, well now everyone's got zombie armies. So A lot of fun can happen with that. Maybe you've got, some zombie synergies where your zombies are pumped and bigger. Maybe you've got some ways to kind of, reduce the power and toughness of your opponent's, creatures or whatnot. So they've got smaller zombies. Maybe you've got some ways to just destroy their armies entirely. But basically this says, hey, you know what? We don't need to have those cards in our hand anymore. Let's just make this more of a combat-focused match and just start swinging away. And it can be a lot of fun. And again, there's definitely going to be some control players out there that aren't going to like this too much when you cast it because there goes their game plan. But yeah, it can definitely kind of turn a game on its head and be a lot of fun that way. Next up, we've got Sadistic Sacrament. It's a sorcery that costs 3 black, but it's got kicker for 7. It says search target player's library for up to 3 cards, exile them, then that player shuffles their library. If Sadistic Sacrament was kicked, instead search the player's library for up to 15 cards, exile them, then that player shuffles their library. So 3 cards for 3 mana, exiling them, searching their library is not, it's not a bomb card. It's not huge. It's, you can kind of, this is a good way to, you cast it, you look through your opponent's library, and if you don't know who that player is, if you don't play with them, if they're not in your play group, if you don't know their kind of deck in and out, then you can kind of get a feel for what their deck is trying to do just for 3 mana, and you can get rid of 3 of their best things. Maybe they've got, 3 win conditions in their deck essentially, and you can take all those cards out. You can take some of their best cards out of their deck, and they kind of have nothing, they have to rely on other win conditions, digging down further in to get to those. So essentially, but if you can cast this for 10 mana, which is not hard in Commander, again, in decks that can ramp, mono black is probably the second best at ramping next to green. And essentially, getting to 10 mana is not an absurd thing to do. If you cast this and can exile 15 cards from one player's library, you can essentially take them out of winning the game. There's plenty of decks out there that don't have, 15 or more cards that essentially are cards that can help them get to a win. And essentially you're just saying, okay, yeah, unless you've got that card in your hand, it's all gone. And now, you know what? You're kind of out of the game. You can really take someone out. You can take out, anything that are threats to you. Maybe your weakness to your deck is board wipes. You can take out all their board wipes, essentially. This is a card that can really help you out. I think it's pretty underrated for the right deck that might be looking to kind of work to control the board, manipulate opponents' libraries, and that kind of stuff too. So it can be a lot of fun. And finally, the last one is a somewhat recent one with Dredge, themire. It's a sorcery for 3 and a black. It says each opponent chooses a creature card in their graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. So basically, this is 4 mana, get 3 creatures for free. And your opponents, again, like, unless they've got, if they've got a slew of creatures, a ton of creatures in their graveyard, then yeah, they can give you, their worst one. Something that really doesn't matter. But if they've only got a couple of creatures in their graveyard and they're all really good creatures, then you're getting something great for 4 mana. You can get 3 huge creatures. And if you've got, ways to potentially, mill your opponents or get certain creatures into their graveyard, or ways to exile other creatures from their graveyard to make sure that you can get the specific right creatures that you want, that's just a cherry on top of this card. Again, this card does not belong in every single deck, but in decks that, can really kind of manipulate maybe graveyards, manipulate what creatures get into them. 4 mana for 3 creatures is a huge deal. So I think that this one can definitely, it can be a valuable card when you cast it, or it can be a game ender when you cast it too. So it's pretty janky, it's kind of off the wall. Your opponent gets to choose. And I think that's kind of the kind of thing about all these cards is that, maybe there's just a slight kind of hiccup in the card. Okay, your opponent might get to choose what happens or whatnot. But again, in Commander, there's a lot of fun things that can happen with that. And yeah, again, maybe you can make a deal with this one, where you say, hey, this player's, got this enchantment out. We need to get rid of it. You've got a Reclamation Sage in your graveyard. Give me that so I can get rid of it. There can be a lot of political things too. And I think a lot of these cards just, yeah, they're fun. They're not the most, powerful cards, but they belong in every single deck, but there's definitely homes for them. So yeah, I encourage you to take another look at some of these janky, awesome cards. But yeah, that's all I've got for today. So comment below with your thoughts on these janky cards, and also comment below and let me know maybe some ones that I missed. What are some janky, awesome cards that you think should have been on this list or should be on a list in the future? So yeah, let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks again and have a good one. And make sure you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons who help make this show possible. I truly couldn't do any of this without your support. If you want to support this channel directly, consider becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There are even tiers where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. You can check out all the Patreon tiers and rewards at patreon.com/commandersquarters. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget Commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.